All right. All right. We're going to go ahead and get started. Well, thank you for coming today. I appreciate you carving out time in your day to listen to this. It's something that's a passion of both mine and Danielle's. So excited to get going. The way this will work is I'm going to go ahead and introduce myself, talk a little bit about our journey, how we got to Colorado, my background, and some information on the LGBTQ plus community. And then we're going to lob it over to Danielle to talk about house hacking, rules and regs, and how we can make this happen for you. And then at the end, we'll have Q&A. There will be opportunity to ask questions at the end. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so I am Erin Morrison. I am a residential real estate agent and realtor here in the Denver Boulder metro areas. I am also licensed in Texas. I spent the last 9.5 years practicing residential sales in Austin, Texas. Before that, I was a landman for 17 years. And no, it is nothing like the television show with Billy Bob Thornton. I never dealt with drug cartels. I never dealt with a private plane crashing on a well site pad. So nothing like that. But it did give me about 17 years of experience with real estate and property law before I moved over to residential real estate. So collectively, I've got over 25 years of experience to assist with my clients. In addition to being a realtor, I am also a short-term rental manager. I am in partnership with two amazing humans. They are not only partners in business, but partners in life, Blake and Jeremy. We are partners in a company called Cribs Consulting, creative real estate investment business solutions. It was founded out of Austin, Texas. We have about 80 properties that we manage. Most of them are around the Austin Hill Country area, but we are in other states as well. And then lastly, I am a fierce LGBTQ plus advocate, especially through the real estate space. I was the 2023 national president for the LGBTQ plus Real Estate Alliance. That organization is a nonprofit organization that works to end discrimination and for fair housing for the LGBTQ plus community. So we work very, very closely with the National Association of Realtors, as well as state and federal legislators to hopefully end discrimination in housing towards our community. Next slide, please. Okay, so this is my beautiful family. This is my wife, Sandra. We've been together 13 years now, and this is our 7-year-old daughter, Mina. We're in Austin, Texas, to be close to our family. That is my birth city. My parents live in Houston. Sandra's parents are in Southwest Louisiana. So when we decided to start our family, we wanted to get somewhere in between so that we could see both sets of grandparents. Austin was perfect for us. And then we started to kind of see legislation happening that did not make us feel so at home anymore. First, I am going to get political here. First, the GOP put on their public facing website that the LGBTQ plus community was abnormal and shouldn't be offered any civil protections against discrimination. And then also, we started to see some legislation happening that didn't come with votes, but it was just what they were putting into law in regards to bodily autonomy for women. And with having a little girl, our number one job is to protect our child. And we just didn't feel like being in Texas, where there would be a potential $10,000 bounty on her head if anything happened, was where we wanted to be. So we had lived in Colorado prior. It's actually where Sandra and I met. Lived here from 2005 to 2014. And when we saw all of this happening in Texas, we just knew that we needed to get out, and Colorado was where we wanted to come back. We currently live in a small town outside of Boulder, Colorado called Gun Barrel. It's about 8 minutes north of Boulder, and we absolutely love it here. I've got the mountains right out my window, snow-capped mountains out my window. I can go mountain biking, gravel biking, road biking right outside my door. It's amazing. We love it. Next slide. Okay, so this slide here represents the states that do not offer protections towards discrimination when it comes to the LGBTQ plus community. This is pulled from HRC's website. It is the most recent state. There are most recent map. There are 31 states out of this map that do not offer protections on a state level. Texas being one of them, and I'm highlighting Texas because that's where we came from. So why is this important? While we currently have protections at a federal level, if for some reason those federal protections go away, it's going to go back to the state. So what does this mean? This means that for sale by owners or real estate agents that aren't necessarily realtors and don't have to abide by a code of ethics can discriminate legally to someone on the basis of sexual orientation or gender identity. What does that look like? You could put a for sale by owner on Facebook or Craigslist could say no mentally ill trans, and they're well within their legal right to do that. Next slide, please. So right now, the only thing kind of holding this together, these federal protections, kind of stems from this executive order, which was Executive Order 13988. This was signed by Biden in 2020. And because of this executive order, which helps to end discrimination in regards to sexual orientation and gender identity, HUD implemented a policy to change the definition of the protected class of sex to also include sexual orientation and gender identity. Now, this executive order was rescinded last Monday by current President Trump. And right now, I'm going to tell you that we don't know what this exactly means right now. I did ask an attorney friend of mine out of Colorado, he is a fellow realtor, for his interpretation. And excuse me one second, because I lost the text here, but he wrote and said, the answer right now is that it's uncertain. Executive orders are in fact considered law, but there must be regulations promulgated by the impacted agencies before it's implemented. There will most likely be some legal challenges to the executive order, and those challenges may put a stay or a hold on the effect of the executive order. So right now, we're honestly in a wait and see period. All to be said, we are watching all of this to see how this impacts housing. Now, why am I talking so much about this? Well, I'm talking about this because a lot of the states that were in that map that don't offer protections are also states where we're seeing the most people within our community migrate from into states like Colorado that have protections, Washington State, Oregon State, etc. So we're seeing a huge migration of people within the LGBTQ plus community from these states into quote unquote safe states, just to make sure that there's not only personal protections and as far as their identity and healthcare, but also when it comes to housing. Next slide, please. So part of the reason why I wanted to join forces with Danielle on this creative way to have home ownership, especially in Colorado, which we're just going to call a spade, is got a higher cost value for housing than, let's say, Florida or Texas, is because I'm passionate about home ownership for the LGBTQ plus community. I genuinely believe that real estate is the most sound investment when it comes to building your own personal wealth, your real estate, your retirement, your real estate portfolio, and generational wealth thereafter. So this here shows the LGBTQ plus home ownership rate and the national average compared to the national average. The national average is about 71%, and the the LGBTQ rate is about 57%. So we're almost 20% below the national average. There's a whole myriad as to reasons as to why that is, and I can share a housing report as to that. But the fact of the matter is the LGBTQ plus community is still behind the national average when it comes to home ownership. And I want to help be a part of bringing that up and getting our community into that wealth building. Next slide. Okay, all that to be said, I would love to bring Danielle Anderson in. Danielle and I met at an open house at a property here in Denver, Colorado that was marketed for this creative measure that we're going to share with you in a little bit. And I was blown away with her presentation, and I knew I had to partner up with her. So I'm really excited for her to share everything with you. And at the end, we'll go ahead and have a Q&A. And before she gets going, I want you all to just keep this in mind while she's going through her presentation, that this creative measure that she's going to show you is not only going to help you in your real estate endeavors and building wealth, but it's also going to think about the people that we can help in our community that are having to move quickly and need a place to stay, and how you can help provide that shelter for them in this creative way. Okay, Danielle, take it away.
Perfect. Thank you, Erin. So $300,000. That is how much money I've made off my primary residence home in Denver, Colorado since 2017. That is about $37,000 annually, or a teacher's salary after taxes are taken out, or about $3,100 a month from the place that I also live. So my house isn't a mansion. To get started, I just want to share a little video of what my house hack looks like in Denver, Colorado. It's this little water park bungalow here that then I put in this path so guests can go around to the left, and then I can enter right there. But then they come in through my back gate into my backyard and into their own private entrance with a keypad lock, which is key. So then they would go down right there, and then I will close those doors when they get here, so it's private. So now it's a completely separate space. And they have their private space down here, equipped with a couch and a little TV area, a little mini kitchenette. Think hotel room. I don't even have a microwave. I just have a coffee pot, wine glasses, and a wine opener. And it's just a little 1-bedroom and 1 bathroom. And that makes between $2,000 and $3,000 a month. So this is my home. This is where I'm actually doing this presentation right now. I'm sitting in my office upstairs. Currently, I've changed my strategy since I've videoed that in July, where I currently have a long-term tenant in my basement for, he is renting it for $1,500 a month, fully furnished, and he shares a kitchen with me upstairs. So one of the things that I like to mention about house hacking is it's fluid. It can change. When I first purchased my house, I was renting out the upstairs where I'm at right now, and I was living in the basement because the place with the kitchen was more profitable than my little unit downstairs. So I flipped that. Now, when COVID happened, I put in the separate entrance, then I moved upstairs, started having guests downstairs. So it changed a lot. With housing affordability, which we're going to get to in 1 second, it's one way to dramatically increase the probability of people wanting to buy versus rent. Now, there's nothing wrong with renting. However, renting is, if you're paying $2,500 in rent each month, that $2,500 is going to your landlord, and you essentially just throw it away for the month of housing. When you purchase a home, part of that payment is going towards your equity, and you're building equity. Meanwhile, that asset is typically appreciating, which we're going to get to also at the end of this presentation, of the likelihood of homes that continue to appreciate. And so you get to invest in your future self by owning the home versus renting the home, which is why I love house hacking as a barrier of entry, or I'm sorry, removing that barrier of entry to keeping your monthly payment very similar to what you're used to paying in rent. So today we're going to just cover, what is house hacking? Why do you consider it? What types of house hacking? If you're looking to move from, especially like Texas, I moved from Houston, Erin moved from Austin. My house in Houston, costs a lot less than my house in Denver, Colorado. And how did we, I chose an area that was rentable and a house that I could divide to make that difference in monthly payment a lot easier. So how do we find those houses and what do we look for when we're searching for a home? And then how much can you actually make? And then just renting versus buying. So house hacking, my simple definition is a home that you buy that you make money off of. So that can be a long-term roommate situation. Now, I'm 36. I don't want a long-term roommate. I want to have my own house and my own terms. And even my roommate right now in my basement is on a month-to-month terms. I met him at a hostel in Hawaii when I was vacationing in March. He needed housing in Denver. He reached out to me and I was like, oh, you can stay here for 5 days. And then I ended up really enjoying hanging out with him and having him. So we've just moved it from 5 days to 30 days. Now he's on kind of like a month to month kind of thing. But so any way that you make money off of it is technically the definition. For a lot of move-up buyers, it might mean that you buy a house with something called an ADU or an accessory dwelling unit, which means that maybe you buy a bigger house than you think you can afford, or a monthly payment that is kind of scary, that has a separate dwelling, then it's completely separate from you. So it might be you and your family live in a single family house, have this accessory dwelling unit, or think granny flat or mother-in-law suite, then you rent that out and it's completely separate. It might mean that you buy a duplex and live in one half of the duplex and rent out the other side of the duplex. So it could be short-term rentals, long-term rentals, mid-term rentals. There's many different ways of house hacking. So question, if you want to type in the chat, would you consider generating or would you be open to renting out a part of the home that you live in? Yes, no. This is why you're here. Apart while I'm not home but have small children, don't feel comfortable while they're home. Yep, I didn't even mention that, Tiana or Julia. That's 100% a different strategy. I went from having somebody all the time to I have an owner's closet that has a keypad lock, and I literally you could lock your bedroom and bathroom so nobody's sleeping in your personal space. And if you go visit your grandparent or your parents for 2 weeks during Christmas, can rent out the house. Or if you go on vacation, etc. And Tiana, not your current home, but I think it's a great idea. So my parents are retired teachers. So if anybody knows anything about teacher salaries, they didn't make, we weren't millionaires growing up. But they now as a retirees, they're on a fixed income. Being on that fixed income, they also rent their house out when they go, they're going to South Africa this summer, and are planning to rent out their home while they're gone, so it kind of pays for their vacation. They might not be able to afford that vacation or that lifestyle if they weren't renting out a part of their home. So it's really, I guess the point that I'd like to bring home here is it can be adapted to what you're comfortable with, right? If you don't want people sleeping in your bed, well, lock your bedroom and bathroom, but maybe you still have 2 extra bedrooms that you could also rent out. And so what makes this so desirable to do? One, maybe it allows you to purchase a larger home, right? Versus going into, so I like to think of it sometimes as a cheaper option, even though it's more expensive. So let's just, for example, take a $400,000 one-bedroom condo. A $400,000 one-bedroom condo, your monthly payment, don't quote me on it, it's gonna HOAs, insurance, current interest rates, but probably about $3,800. But what if you had a $650,000 house that was $4,500 monthly payment, but you could make $2,000 from your basement? That you just bridge that gap in monthly payment by buying the larger home. Then let's just think, oh, I'm planning to have a family. We're going to have more kids, right? With the condo, you're going to have to sell the condo, move up in 4 years, 3 years, 5 years, and have realtor fees versus buying the bigger house on the get-go, renting it out, and moving up into it as your family grows or as your needs change. So I just like to look at the different reasons. And then the other reason that I house hack is I love not feeling house poor. I love that I can say yes to going to Puerto Rico in March and knowing that, oh, I'm just gonna rent out my house and make money so I don't have the double expenses of travel. So one of the reasons that I'm talking about this, and I love bringing it up, is home unaffordability is at an all-time high, or home affordability as at an all-time low. It is very hard, one, not only to buy a house, but even if you're a renter, it's like hard, like just monthly payments on housing is a larger percentage of people's take-home pay than it has been in the past. And so this is one trick or method in order to bridge that gap to make the pressure of inflation feel less burdensome. And the vast majority of renters, 86%, would like to buy a home, but just think that they can't afford it. And I'm a mortgage lender, so I'm a house hacker, Airbnb host, but I'm also a mortgage lender that helps get people into homes from a financing perspective. And what I find is that most people can qualify for a home. They just don't want the monthly payment that we're telling them the monthly payment would be. So if we're open to renting out a portion of our home, that takes that monthly payment difference between what you're renting at and what you're buying at and closes that gap. So I kind of mentioned this, but the different types of house hacks, a lock off. So like what I have here in my basement with the 2 barn doors that shut. I live upstairs, have short-term rental guests in the basement. If I had a full kitchen in the basement, then that would just be a lock off or an ADU with a basement. In Denver, if you have a full kitchen, it changes the rules and regulations of if you can or cannot short-term rent, which is the definition is under 30 days. Shared space or by the room rental. So before I had those barn doors, I didn't have anything that separated the guests from me. So I lived in the basement, the guests were upstairs, and technically there was no door in between. Or the whole house. So if you go travel, if you work remotely, then you could lock your bedroom and bathroom and rent out the entire other 2-bed, 2-bath and not have them in your space. Or I'm crazy enough where I would take my clothes from my closet, move it to an locked owner's closet, and just have the cleaners come in and rent out the entire house while I was gone. So how do we find these money-making homes? These are the types of things that we look at. One, location. What type of house hack do I want? Do I want to be able to do short-term rentals, mid-term rentals, long-term rentals, all of the above? In which case, that's going to limit the areas in which you can buy. If it's a primary residence, all of the primary residence municipalities are all allow for primary residence. If you're buying this as a primary residence to house hack, you're fine. If you're buying a home as an investor, for example, the city of Denver and the house that I short-term rent, my basement, I would not be able to do that if I didn't actually live in my house. There's also HOA restrictions that we have to be aware of. So most homeowners associations do not allow for short-term rentals under 30 days. So if you want to only rent it out when you go on vacation, you need to make sure that you're not in an HOA that limits how many days you can rent it, or the minimum amount of days. That if you can only rent it for 30 days, but you wanted to rent it for 2 weeks when you're gone for Christmas, that home wouldn't work. The other things that you look for is property layout. In Colorado, we have so many basements. If you're moving from Texas, you don't know what basements are. We have so many basements that either have a walkout entrance, think of a sliding glass door that just walks out to the yard, that you could have a path to come in that doesn't interfere with your life upstairs. Or houses like mine that don't have that have a door and the stairs go right down into the basement. It's a separate door. I don't have to see the guests. They're not passing through my personal space ever, and it's completely separate. But if you have a basement, not all basements have tall ceilings. Well, if you're trying to rent it, and has a little short ceiling and all your guests have to duck or they can't live there comfortably, that's gonna be an issue. And then there might be like just a master suite. So I've got one client that has a townhome near Tennyson Street that her guests actually, she allows them to walk in through their garage, so they lock their cars, but then it has a stairwell that goes straight down, and it's just this little master suite in the basement unit. And then we also want to know how much can, a particular property generate in rental income. So I use something called AirDNA, which aggregates Airbnb and VRBO data to show, okay, here's the listings in and around where you want to purchase. If we pop in that address, what is the likelihood that you're going to make $1,500 a month or $2,000 a month or $3,000 a month? It'll tell us what the projected rental income is for those particular units or homes. So here's a little example of why it's important to look at which location. So like I mentioned, everyone around the Denver area, except for Parker, allows primary residence. But if you ever moved out and a strategy of yours is like, oh, I'm going to buy this short term and live in it, and then I'm going to move out and then still be able to short term rental. Well, in Denver, you can't. But in Mountain View, a little cut up really close to Denver, you can, and they allow investors. In Arvada, you can, but it's only 240 days that you can rent the property. So there's very specific regulations that prohibit what you can and cannot do. And we just need to make sure that when we are looking at an area and you decide, hey, I do want to like be able to have a, rent it when I'm gone, that you're able to do that. So if we're wanting to understand more, one, this is things that Erin and I do as your team if you're moving to Colorado and want to look into short-term rental regulations. But let's just say you decide, Colorado's not for you and you're moving to a different state. So the first thing that you want to do is Google the short-term rental ordinance and then the name of the city and the state. And you want it to make sure it says .gov at the address line, because if it's a news article, there could have been regulations that came out after that news article. Like, you want to go straight to the source on what those regulations are. And then I like to go one step further and email and call the municipality just to make sure that there's not changes happening. And then make sure you read all of the ordinance and HOA docs to make sure that there's nothing, in there. Like, for example, in Wheat Ridge, short-term rentals are fine. And you can even have them as an investor. But if there's a 2-unit, one person of that 2-unit has to be the owner of the building. You couldn't have a long-term rental in one unit and a short-term rental in another, which is just like an example of like nuances of regulation. So the different types of money-making homes, we talked about mine where it's the basement. This is an example. If we're walking in right here, it's a ranch style home, which means it's just like one level. And you would walk into this door and a door. So there's 2 doors. If you're at this open house, there's no door on the door jamb, but that would be like a $400 improvement to then have a lock here, and you would enter through your so here's the living room and the kitchen. You can see this little door right here. You would just enter through that door and that would be your front door. So you would give up your front door, but then you would have a little money-making primary suite right at your front door that would be very easy to take a single family house and make it into what I like to coin a sneaky duplex, where it's not really a duplex per city and county regulations, but it's a lock-off unit that only needed a door hinge and a keypad lock, and you now have a place that, one, you could rent out when you're on vacation. You could rent out, if you lost your job and needed additional income, or you just wanted additional income from the get-go. It would be super easy to convert the single family house into a two unit. And then this is an example of a walkout basement. So that door is just her basement. I'll let the video play.
She lives in this little door, and then where Sarah is where her Airbnb guests go. I love this because a short-term rental can be anything. It doesn't have to be a basement that your guests are in. You can live in a walkout basement with gorgeous natural light, and it's still a freaking awesome return. So she's making over $4,000 a month. What do we say? $53,000? Change. Yeah. So let's go see what her guests walk into.
All right. So the reason that so mine makes between 2,000 and 3,000 depending on the demand of the season. In Colorado, the highest demand months are the summer months for tourism. So she makes $4,400 just on her upstairs, and she lives downstairs. The reason hers makes so much more money than mine is that she has 3-bed, 2-bath upstairs, while she lives in the 1-bed, 1-bath downstairs, which means that she has the opportunity for 6 more people when I only allow for 2 people in my unit. I like less people and less money in each house because I don't want to deal with the noise. 2 people, 1 to 2 people are usually very quiet. The reason I don't have a microwave is I don't want to smell their food. I don't want to hear them eat. Like, I don't want them in my, like, go down to Tennyson Street and eat at Uncle or like wherever. But when you're visiting, I like my short-term rental guests to be out of the house, because in a single family house, that's the one downside, is there is going to be noise transfer. They probably can hear me walking back and forth in my home. I can't have parties till midnight, right? I have to be respectful of my guests. But when there's only 2 people, I hardly ever have issues. If I do, I have earplugs that I sleep in at night, and it's really no different than living in an apartment or a condo. So these are particular examples of my clients. One, Elias, who lives in Lakewood, which is a subdivision on the outskirts of Denver, a town, a city on the outskirts of Denver. Suburb is what the word I'm trying to say. Suburb of Denver. And he has a 5-bed, 3-bathroom house. He did buy his house quite a few years ago, so he paid $620,000. His mortgage is $3,600. And he has a separate basement with a separate kitchen, which is a 2-bed, 1-bath. So he's getting $2,100 a month, and all he had to do is add an egress window to make his like compliant and rentable. Katie has a totally different model. She bought a $300,000 little condo, understanding that HOA didn't allow short-term rentals. She is a remote worker, so she can work anywhere, and she just wants to cover her mortgage when she's gone, and so she rents it out just when she's traveling. So she'll go places for like 30 to 90 days and just have a furnished finders traveling nurse, come in and sublease her her home. And then Sarah's, who we just saw in Westminster, that lived in the basement versus the upstairs. This is Sarah's earnings in July. Like I mentioned, the summer months are the peak season. So some clients don't even rent it all year long, but they just rent it in the summer when it's the most profitable, and then don't rent it in the winter. And this is a particular home that this is why you need to work with professionals that really understand the rules and regulations of the city. So this is a listing that was for sale for $540,000. And in the listing, it says it's an ADU for rental income at $1,500 a month. Great. This is awesome. Love that it's a completely separate space. However, upon calling the listing agent, it was identified that this accessory dwelling unit was not permitted, which is 100% fine if your strategy is a long-term tenant. However, if you want a short-term tenant, that will red flag the city, and the city does not like unpermitted work for short-term rental licensing, in which case, upon renewal, most likely your license would be denied. So going into it, we just need to make sure that we understand, again, what we can and cannot do with it. And understanding regulation is one of the most important parts of getting to the bottom of, do I like this home, and can I use this home for what I want it to look like? So current interest rates are floating right around 7%. If you're putting, 35% down and you have an 800 credit score, maybe your interest rate would be like more like 6.875. But for the average person right now, an interest rate is right around 7%. If we're looking at a $550,000 home, putting 5% down, which is the minimum for a repeat buyer. So if you already own a home, the minimum down would be 5%. And your monthly payment would be right around $4,000 without any rental income. So if I'm comparing that to a 2-bedroom condo, like, or lease, I'm like, oh, it's so much cheaper to rent. Cheaper to rent. Now, if I can offset that monthly payment with $1,500 of rental income, either by long-term tenant, midterm tenant, short-term tenant, if we're short-term renting, aka Airbnb, VRBO, $1,500 on a 1-bedroom Denver basement is very doable. That monthly payment goes down to $2,400. Then, if we're utilizing down payment assistance, let's just say you have to sell a house to buy a house, you can still use a program that's called CHAPA, which is Colorado Housing and Down Payment Assistance. And so you're able to get up to 4% of your closing costs and down payment. That makes your down payment and cash to close closer to $18,600 versus $34,000. Your monthly payment stays the same because it's something called a silent second. You don't pay interest or interest on the loan until you either refinance or sell the house. So that monthly payment then becomes $2,400, either at $35,000 down or $18,000 down. Now, the average rent in Denver for a 2-bedroom is about $2,200. So if you're willing to make $1,500 off of a like split level single family house, then you could essentially get into a home for around the same amount as what the average 2-bedroom rent is. So if we look at that if we just look at the cash flow difference without factoring in cash flow, right? So let's just say we're just looking at renting versus buying. That cash flow difference, it is cheaper to rent by $102,000 if the only thing that we're looking at is that $4,000 monthly payment versus the $2,200 monthly payment. But there's a lot of different things that we need to factor into that decision. One of those is something called appreciation gain. So at a $550,000 home, the appreciation historically is about 4.5% in Denver. So that $550,000 home today in 2025, in 3 years is not going to be $550,000 anymore. It's going to increase. That's what the appreciation gain means. The amortization gain, what that means is like how much of that monthly payment are you paying yourself as you're paying down that debt and that loan balance goes down. Then with renting, you don't have any tax benefits. You can't write off anything as a renter. Whereas when you're a homeowner, you can write off your mortgage interest. You can write off your taxes. As a landlord, right? Because you would be renting out a spot. You can write off all the furnishings, all of the pots and pans, wine glasses, microwave, couch, everything to furnish your rental unit. You can also write off, which this is only calculating the net standard deduction within homeownership, not including being a landlord. So there's more to it then. So if we look at those in 5 years, your net gain without even factoring in any rental income is about $40,890. Just looking at primarily appreciation gain. And I like to look at appreciation gain like inflation of any other product. If you think of a house like a product, think of milk, right? Think of milk, or eggs is a hot topic right now, right? Eggs 5 years ago was not $5, right? Same, and I like to think about lunch money, right? If my parents gave me lunch money back in 2006 when I was a senior in high school, they gave me $5 a day. What today can you buy for $5 a day? Like I would starve if that was my lunch money, like my allowance that I got each month. So if we look at a home, that is one of the primary reasons that homes appreciate over time, is because they're like any other product, like milk, like eggs, like lunch money, right? Things in the US get more expensive because of something called inflation. Homes are the same way. Homes are not, they're also subject to the same inflation. And this is a quick chart of what that inflation or the appreciation gains look like over time. So if you bought in 2006, that would have been the worst time to purchase a home in recent history. And really, like, not even recent history, because this goes back all the way to the 1940s. So 2006 was right before something called the housing crisis. The housing crisis was doomed because of predatory lending, where literally any lender without docs, Aaron could just be like, yeah, I make 300,000. I'm like, okay, here's a loan. Like, literally, that's what was happening in 2008 and why our housing market crumbled. If you bought in 2006 and sold in 2009, you would have lost, what is that? 19% on the home that you purchased. If you bought in 2006, but then kept it till today, you would have been thinking, oh, I'm so happy that I kept it. So I always like to point out, real estate, if you're a flipper, as in you want to buy a house, refurbish it, and sell it within a year, it is a very risky game. If you're a buy and hold and live there as your primary, especially if you house hack, it becomes way less risky because historically, the odds are pretty good of it going up. I purchased my home in 2016. This is my little bungalow. You can see there's no path there that I added in later to that gate, for $411,000. Now, my neighbors' homes are selling more like $750, $775, but just a Zillow estimate of what I could sell the house for today is right around 700,000. This is time in market versus timing the market. Right now,
Hey,
interest rates
I
aren't
just
great.
called you on my other phone. What's wrong? Yeah.
Okay. Interest rates aren't great. It's, it's a little, it's scary to purchase a home right now. I think it's less scary if you have a plan going into it of how are we going to shrink that monthly payment to make it where you feel comfortable. So after learning all of this, I've got some resources for if you're looking to purchase in the next few months and want more concrete resources for your particular situation, then text 970-450-4558 now hack. If you're like, I'm just getting started, just send just text starter hack, like, oh, I'm like 6 months out, a year out, I don't know, I'm just on here to get a little bit more information. Click starter hack and I can send you resources like specific to like a little bit farther down the road. And then if you're an owner of a current house and you're just like, hey, how can I like house hack my own house? Like, can you tell me some tips or tricks, or like, I want to see how I can make a little bit extra money when I'm on vacation or I'm not home, or how I can convert my basement. I'd be happy to give some input on the owner. So you can text that number owner hack and I'd be able to give you more information on that. So if you're looking to, oops, I kind of already did the summary. If you're looking to move to Colorado, Erin Morrison is an amazing real estate agent that has so much, not only expertise in the buying and selling process, but also as a property management company. She knows all of the rules and the regulations, what you can't do, how to set up your house, like what will work. So if you're just like, okay, I'm just curious, like, how does a house move work? Like, I'm coming from here, going to here, I have a house to sell, I don't have a house to sell, I'm currently renting. She is offering a free consultation just to understand your scenario better. So this is a QR code that has her calendar link. If you wanted to scan the QR code to get a little bit more information, you can book a meeting with Erin. Does anybody have any questions up at this point? All right. Anybody need more time getting the QR code? We good?
Mm.
Okay.
Okay.
And then as a lender, I also do something called a napkin pre-approval. So essentially, if a move is somewhere in your future, whether it's a month from now, 6 months from now, 2 years from now, you're not sure if you want to move or not, want to understand like what does a monthly payment look like in my market or Colorado market or wherever. These napkin pre-qualifications is no commitment, and same thing with Aaron's too. No commitment, no, like you're not signing your life away. You're not saying that you have to move. It's just a quick 15-minute chat on your particular situation of, hey, what does this look like? Like if I make X amount and have a house right now or don't have a house right now, like what's my max qualification? Like, can I even think about this in the future? That's what this napkin pre-qualification is. So that's my QR code for my calendar. Would love to chat with you about your particular situation and see if a move is possible in the future. Anybody need more time there? Okay, perfect. And then Aaron and I are both pretty active on social media. So if you just are interested in quick tips, tricks, short-term rentals or home buying in general, or what moving to Colorado looks like, we share just different posts almost daily. I try to post at least 3 times a week, which is not daily, but a lot more than I was. So would be happy to have you guys follow us and stay connected. And then this is the time if you want to post any questions of house hacking, of buying, of lending into the chat, or come off mute and ask your question. We'd be happy to stick around for the next 15-20 minutes to answer any questions that you might have.
No questions? Did you guys like today's presentation? Was this informative?
Yes,
Wonderful.
And Mary, where are you at?
I'm in Austin.
Austin, okay. Love it.
Yeah. So, in light of all the recent developments in this country, I'm not sure Denver is far enough, but I got in touch with Erin through TikTok. I started following her, and Denver, Colorado is a state we would very much be interested in looking into, maybe just kind of getting our feet wet, maybe a second home
Oh,
kind of
fun.
thing that we could do what you're doing,
Oh.
and live in it part of the time and not live in it the rest of the time. So just kind of, this is all good information. And yeah, my concern about it was all the possible regulations. I live in a neighborhood where a lot of people were, during the housing rush, 2021, when everybody was paying way more than value for homes because they were moving from California. And they thought, oh, we can just Airbnb the house too. We'll just buy 2 houses. And kind of ended up finding out that the HOAs said, no, 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 but no, you can't. Anyway,
Well, that's
so
because
it's
they
kind
didn't
of
use
fun.
me as a
Yeah, those kind
realtor.
of things can get in your way. Yeah, I think it was a shock for a lot of people. So what you were talking about, all the different codes and regulations and what qualifies for this and what qualifies for that, that was interesting. And
Yeah,
definitely something. Yeah, definitely would need someone like you and Aaron to dig through that,
navigate where you can
drill
actually,
down on that.
do it
Yeah,
as a second home, because second home's much harder than a primary residence. Like primary residence,
yeah,
pretty much you can do it almost anywhere in Colorado. But a second home, yeah, you'd have to look in Mountain View, Westminster, Arvada, like specific cutouts of different places. So that's one thing that Erin's really great at, is like setting searches specific to like what your goals are. If your goals are to, offset your mortgage when you're not using it, then we need to make sure that the search is set up that you're not going to look at houses that you can't even do what you want to do with it.
Right.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And I
Yeah,
think one thing, Mary, that, to be less risk averse is to just always have an exit strategy in place if zoning or permitting were to change in regards to short-term rental laws, so that your house could be utilized, let's say, as a midterm rental, which is still furnished like an Airbnb, but it's 30 days to like a year. And you can still advertise it on Airbnb. There aren't as stringent as regulations, but having that as an exit if for some reason short-term rental laws change. And then if both of those for some reason go away, long-term rentals. So I believe when working with my investor clients and my primary clients that are looking at house hacking and bringing in income, that we look at the big picture, we look at exits, and we look at how that particular ADU or basement or property is going to perform in each of those scenarios, so that you're kind of covering your bases.
yeah, yeah. Well, I appreciate that. And yeah, my husband and I'll talk about it. We really enjoyed our trip to Colorado in October. But we would be the opposite people. We would be the ones who would want to live in our Colorado home in the summer and get away from the triple digit heat here in Austin, and then the opposite. So I think that pushes us out probably more toward the ski areas, where the winter people who would be interested in renting would probably want to be, so they could be close to the slopes and the lifts and everything. So
Mm-hmm.
that pushes us into a higher bracket price wise, I think.
So
You
I think
also want to look at, the fact that football games are happening during the fall and part of the winter months. You want to look at the fact that there's certain conferences that are still going on through October and November. So I wouldn't cancel out like Denver proper, because there's still some things that attract people to come here during the fall and winter months. And you don't necessarily have to be in the ski area. And if you're looking at midterm rentals, which are great for traveling nurses or remote workers, those are all the time year round. They're not necessarily there's no seasonality to that necessarily.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, good. Good to know that's a brisk market. That's what scares me. And all of a sudden, we've invested, and then, oh gosh, there's just nobody wanting these things anymore. Nobody wants to, there's just not, the traffic. So that's
And
good
I
to
will
know.
tell you, as a rental manager, especially in Austin, because I was the realtor that was helping these investors buy these houses in 2020 through 22 in Austin. So I know exactly what you're talking about. And I'm an STR manager, and I absolutely saw the influx and the flooding of the Airbnb market with properties. And the ones that succeeded, and the ones that and what makes me so proud to work with Cribs is our properties we're super host for all of them, which is a big deal. And what sets us apart, and what we tell people is you have to set yourself apart from the competition. You have to have good pictures, you have to have good sturdy furniture, you have to get a good experience. So if that happens here, where we see an influx and we see a flood of people coming in as doing these kinds of things, and maybe it's diluting the STR market or the MTR market, that is conversation for you to have with someone like me that's a manager that has my finger on the pulse as to like what things are driving traffic into certain properties, certain short-term rental properties. What amenities are they offering? What can we do to zhuzh up your listing to make it more attractive to people to want to book?
Yeah. Well, I watch the market up there. I get on Zillow and Redfin, and I check to see what's going on. And I think I would probably need a little more guidance as far as areas, neighborhoods, because if it would be something that we would be occupying 6 months of the year, and then kind of splitting residences, I'd need a little guidance on that. So that's kind of
Gotcha.
down the line.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for inviting me to this. I
Yeah.
appreciate it.
absolutely. And if you wanted to make sure, because especially in the mountain towns, there's a lot of different regulations. So when you're looking at Zillow and Redfin and whatnot, a lot of the places that you might want or look at, you can't actually rent. So
Yeah.
I just pulled up Aaron's one, so that if you wanted a more customized search on areas that allow short-term rentals, that's something that she could like set up for you. I know that it might be like a year out or 6 months, like, and not super urgent, but it might be something that's like, oh, let's like get it dialed in of like at least the areas that you're looking like to make sure that when you're looking at homes, it's like, oh, this works. So
Mhm.
yeah.
And I hope that all of y'all on the call, and I don't know who is a member of the LGBTQ, LGBTQ community, like I am, but I hope you can see how this marries well with those people that are leaving these states and needing immediate shelter, whether they're leaving because they need to have health care or because of their identity, or they're worried about if their relationship is going to be recognized. This creative way gives you an opportunity to provide shelter and housing for this migration that's happening. So
Mhm.
yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, well, just,
Well, thank you all for coming
no,
on today. We really appreciate it. And Danielle and I are always available if you have any questions. And until then, live in gratitude and have a wonderful rest of your week.
thanks, you too, bye.
See you guys. Thanks, Erin. Bye.
Bye.